You are now watching Zaclasage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' peeps? Welcome back to the channel, Zaclasage here. Today we're going to be going over the other half of the best decks in the format. This is going to be the top 20 decks, decks 11 through 20 in the format. So what decks might those be? Well, we already know that Mew VMAX is number 1, and we know that Ice Rider is up there, and Arceus and Inteleon's up there. Decks like Dragapult VMAX and other decks that are played to some degree fall within this category. So this one moves around a lot more. In this video, I'm going to explain why these decks are good, or the strategy of these decks, explain how they're positioned in the metagame, and my general thoughts on all of them. So that's really what this video is going to be about. In the pinned comment below, there are going to be deck lists and created content for almost all of these videos, or for almost all of these decks in video form. So if you want to check that out, by all means, check that out. That'd be great. If you want to help support the stream or the content, you can go to ptcgeostore.com, plug in code Zaclasage5 to save 5% on your next order of codes. You can go to alicecollectibles.com, plug in code Zaclasage8. You can also go to betify.gg at Zaclasage and pick up some coaching. All those are available in the description. So check that out. We're going to see exactly what's going to be going on starting at number 20. Any guesses in the comments? Let us know. Hit that like button, hit that sub button. Let's jump to number 20. Mad Party it all the way to number 20, and not making the list last week is Mad Party. The goal of this deck is to get a bunch of Mad Party Pokemon in your discard pile. You could discard them with Ultra Ball, Professor's Research, T-Break, and then you just want to do a bunch of damage with Mad Party. This deck got revived in Brilliant Stars because it now plays, it got double turbo energy, and it got Ultra Ball, like cards that allow you to discard Mad Party Pokemon. Choice Belt certainly doesn't hurt. So as a single prize card deck, this deck certainly can pack a punch and really kind of go toe-to-toe with a lot of these VSTAR VMAX decks. That's really where it comes to the strategy. I mean, Mad Party's going to do Mad Party things. Where this deck crumbles is that your attackers are also the Pokemon you want to have in your discard pile. And we lost a Dene GX in our rotation back in August. So it's one of those things where it's hard to discard the Pokemon we want to discard. And that's really going to be like the biggest case. You're going to be missing numbers, missing an energy, and it's the game of what did we miss this turn. If you're not missing, this deck's a great deck. Otherwise, I think Mad Party's a little too fragile for the metagame. I think we really need one of those more like drop down, discard kind of things, like the Dene GX to really pitch a full hand so we can dig a little bit deeper in the deck. Collapse Stadium does work out wonderfully here to kind of remove things like Crobat and Lumineon from play. So I think that Mad Party probably just isn't capable enough for the metagame right now. It's fine enough to play if you enjoy playing Mad Party, but from a competitive sense, we do have to understand that Mad Party might not necessarily be as well developed as other single prize card decks such as Rapid Strike Malamar. So as much as Mad Party is a fun deck to play, it might not be the best one if you're trying to go for a dub at Salt Lake City. That's why it's in number 20. Splashing into number 19 and not making the list last week is a bit of a surprise deck here, and something that I wasn't expecting. Suicune V with Inteleon. Now, we have seen a few of these versions of this deck pop up over the past few months, but in our Brilliant Stars metagame, we saw Suicune Ludicolo, and I guess Suicune and Ludicolo eventually transformed into this as the metagame settled, with Arceus V-Star and Gengar and Etern and Jolteon just seeing some success. Rapid Strike Urshifu does seem like a good way to counterbalance Suicune V's lightning type weakness, and of course those are just like valid Pokemon that are weak to fighting type. Lumineon V breathes new life into this deck because you can now search out Melanie and accelerate energies to Suicune V and attack with Blizzard Rondo. You use the Drizzile and Inteleon line to search things out and do some extra damage here or there, Path to the Peak, Cape of Toughness. There's a lot of cool little nifty things that you can do with this deck. Well, I'm not entirely sure if this deck is going to continuously see success. There's nothing generally wrong with it. This list is heavily based off the list that my Shuffle Squad teammate Logan McKay was able to win the Southeast Asia Open with. Shout out to them for playing this deck. I mean, I think they were really the reason why this deck saw any kind of CP this week, so it is something that I do expect to fall off into the metagame. Suicune might not be as good as Ice Rider anymore, just because of Choice Belt and the numbers that it's hitting. Galloping all the way into number 18 and staying from number 18 last week is Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX with Arceus V-Star. Now this deck is going to function like a Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX deck. It's going to be using Underworld Door, accelerating energies with its ability, and they're trying to be hitting as hard as possible with Max Geist. Arceus V-STAR comes in here. You could accelerate energies to it, or not necessarily accelerate energies to it. You can attach a double turbo energy. Attach an energy is the word that I'm looking for. Attach the energy to the Arceus V-STAR. You can use energy switch. Then you could use Trinity Nova all in one kind of hit. You can then use your Starbirth ability to search out things like boss's orders or other pieces, maybe even an energy to get things back. In terms of just like a cohesive and like synergistic deck, I think accelerating energies and hitting for a lot of damage, there's something very fun about it. I know that's like the fun kind of decks that I like playing. In terms of competitive standard, this deck is struggling a lot because there are quite a few dark decks out there that are trying to counter Mew VMAX, the #1 deck in format. If you haven't got a chance to watch yesterday's video, check out yesterday's top best decks from March week 2. We do those every single Monday at 12. We do the continuation video every single Tuesday at 12 Eastern. So anyways, jumping back into it, I think this deck just gets unfairly countered, and it's just like not meant for this metagame, although it is a very cohesive, synergistic deck. So if you do like Shadow Rider, this is a great way to play it. Rolling all the way to number 17, not making the list last week, is Zoroark Toolbox. Now, this deck's going to be heavily based, if not the exact same list that Josh Frank played to the late night series, and I thought it was really cool. You can use Zoroark's ability to kind of transform into things, and you have access to Wormadam, a couple of Wormadams, and just like a few general cards that can do various effects. Maybe your opponent's playing GX Pokemon or V Pokemon or anything in play, or maybe you have a lot of Pokemon in your discard pile, or maybe you're able to be playing against a deck where Malevolent Charge can work out. This deck has a lot of options, and I think it's like one of those like fragile single prize card decks that it has a really cool idea behind it. It just depends if it works out that way. And I think like Zoroark being very cool, having all this amazing ability is something that I've always wanted to mess around with. This is a take on the deck that is definitely worthwhile to test, although you have to be very understanding of what the metagame is that you're running into, which can cause this deck to either see a lot of success, because if you really nail the metagame, you're going to be cruising through it as long as you're able to get set up. If you don't know the metagame, then you're probably going to have the wrong text equipped in your deck. And you also have to play very well in order to choose the right text at the right time. And there's a lot of just like unique cards in this deck, like Clara, Echoing Horn, all that kind of stuff going on. So give this deck a try if you're looking for something brand new. Otherwise, I do think other single prize card decks like Malamar are just a little bit more well-rounded than this deck right now. That could change in the future, but I don't necessarily think the general community is going to be really working on this deck as much as Mew VMAX and other things. It needs kind of that popularity pick, and I just don't know if this deck's going to get there. Galloping all the way to number 17 and falling all the way down from number 9 last week is Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX with Arceus V-STAR. So if you watched the top 10 decks video from Monday, you would know that Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX came 5th, and I talked a little bit about this. I think that some versions of decks are going to be split into two. Does it play Arceus or does it play, does it play Arceus? Does it not play Arceus? In this case, this deck does play Arceus, and it seems like the extra cards going into the Ice Rider deck that just aren't Arceus cards, such as Double Turbo, Charon, the whole Arceus line, are really added consistency cards or extra tech cards for certain matchups. So in this case, I think the Arceus detracts away from the strategy of just using Melanie and either going right to the High King or Max Lance. Of course, you still have the Choice Belt. Of course, you still have the Leon, the Quick Shooting. But you just have to fit the Arceus line in there, and that's what makes it difficult. Now, when I get this deck going and you're able to go Starbirth and Shady Dealings to a whole bunch, that's really cool, and that's where this deck feels great. Otherwise, I just feel like the other Ice Rider is probably more consistent. And it's hard because Starbirth can search for any two cards, but it's an Arceus Ice Rider deck. I think we also see the same thing with Arceus decks. Arceus Inteleon and Arceus Cinccino are both two just pure Arceus decks. Those decks are performing better than other decks like Arceus Duraludon or Arceus Malamar. So by all means, I think that Arceus knows its place. It does make some decks really cool. It is a valid option. It might just not be good as those decks as themselves. So you got kind of play towards your own strengths is the advice that I'm trying to give here. I think this deck is probably just eventually going to get morphed into Ice Rider, just Ice Rider. The third deck tied at number 17 in a row, always number 17, just like last week, is Rapid Strike Urshifu with Galarian Moltres. Now, the goal of this deck is to be fighting in Dark type. At least that's the core of the deck. You want to be able to use Rapid Strike Urshifu as a standalone function of the deck. You have access to using Gmax Rapid Flow, Quick Shooting, Telescopic Sight, Passimian, you can do all the cool little tricks that this deck can do, including having Metacham. The other half of this deck has Galarian Moltres V. Now, with all these other tricks, you don't have room for Energy Switch or anything else like that, so you could just use Moltres and attack as a Dark-type Pokemon. It can be quite effective against Mew VMAX sometimes. I think this is the reason why this deck isn't seeing as much success, is because top Mew players are not necessarily falling to just a couple Dark Techs here and there. They're able to isolate certain targets when it comes down to it, and I think this is ultimately where this deck fails. I'd like to see Rapid Strike Urshifu kind of resurgent a little bit. Maybe not in this core. I think maybe just like a pure Rapid Strike, or maybe even Rapid Strike Arceus would be really cool. But we're still trying to figure out exactly where that would be, and that's just in response to Jolteon VMAX winning the Metafy event, and Gengar, and Etern, and Arceus being up at the top tables. So I do think there is room for a fighting type deck. I just don't know if Rapid Strike Moltres is what we're looking for right now. So if anything, I think this deck might just stay kind of like within the same spot, but if another Rapid Strike build takes off, this deck might eventually fall off. Swinging into number 14 and not making the list last week is Arceus VSTAR with Dhelmise VMAX. Now, this is not a deck that I was expecting, but I think I have a hunch of why this deck's seeing success. Now, at this point, I think we've kind of gone over that Arceus VSTAR is going to be able to use its Trinity Nova attack, search for some energies, and the double turbo plus basic energy combo is going to be very seen across here. You also got Arceus V, Trinity Charge, you can accelerate energies, it's all cool. Starbirth, search it, whatever you want. I think that Arceus V Star, or sorry, Arceus V Star, I did say it right, It's hard when there's V Stars and VMAX, okay peeps, It's one of those things where this deck is going to be very popular. I think we've seen a lot of builds. Even in this video, we've already seen Arceus Ice Rider, Arceus Shadow Rider. In the other vid, we got Arceus Inteleon, Arceus Duraludon, Arceus Toolbox, Arceus Malamar. Like, every deck is playing Arceus that is not Mew. Pretty much. At least that's what it seems like. Dhelmise VMAX allows you to hit hard at 240 damage. Cool. You have access to Choice Belt, which turns that up to 270 damage. Galarian Zigzagoon does that last 10 to knock things out. So you can knock out something and have a large amount of HP while building up energies, and maybe you could snipe something on the bench and kind of have a decent, like, attack against an Arceus V-Star deck. Now, I think, like, there's not really too much else. Like, Grass weakness is not very common. It's one of those things where fire types are not really common. It just seems to me bulky attacker plus Arceus V-Star in the event where players are searching for VMAX Pokemon to power up, or Pokemon V in general to power up with Trinity Nova. Is this a bad deck? No, I think that most decks with Arceus V-Star are pretty playable. Is it a deck choice for me personally? I don't necessarily think so. I could see this deck completely falling off for any other Arceus build right now. If you're kind of playing around with this deck, let me know what your thoughts are on it. I'd love to hear some more thoughts on this deck. Splashing into number 13 and not making the list last week is Inteleon VMAX, the one that plays Cheryl. So I do want to say that this list it did double the amount of CP that we just saw with Arceus Dhelmise, and it's one of those things where I could see Inteleon VMAX seeing a little bit more success. The goal of this deck is to use its attack to do 140 damage, lifting back a Rapid Strike energy. You only play 3 Rapid Strike energies because it's searchable out with Octillery's Rapid Strike Search. And you can always search out Octillery with Drizzile, searching for like an Evolution Incense. So this deck has a lot of search potential, and it's really cool like that. After you lift up the energy, your opponent can attack you. If they don't get a knockout, you are now able to use Cheryl. So this deck is attack, lift up energy, Cheryl, and you could also throw Path to the Peak and Marnie and Fan of Waves to your opponent. The newest addition to this deck is Choice Belt, which turns your attack from doing 70 plus 70 if you lift the energy back to 170 damage total. So 170 times 2 is a lot better than 140 times 2. You're able to knock out VMAX Pokemon instead of just knocking out Pokemon 3 hits. That basically saves you 2-3 turns in a game, which does make this deck a lot more competitive. So I just think a lot of players haven't necessarily taken a dive into this deck. I know that I would like to play this deck a little bit more. I have not been able to play in a single Brilliant Stars tournament on PTCGO. I played in a very small tabletop tournament with Gengar, and I was able to win that. But reasonably, it's one of those things where I have not been able to play as much as I'd like to online for my own personal use. So I think that this is a deck that I would definitely want to try out. So if you're looking for something cool, this deck is under-tested, and I think it could shoot up a little bit more. Start birthing all the way to number 12 and not making the list last week and shooting on up. Like, it's one of those things where, like, a deck to shoot and place this high by not placing last week is obviously seeing some success, is Arceus VSTAR with Cinccino. Now, to me, this seems like a spiritual take on the Arceus Inteleon build that is the number 2 deck in the format. It is pure Inteleon with some kind of draw support. We've also seen versions like this play Bidoof. This is the better version than the Bidoof version. I know Bidoof's one of my favorite Pokemon, but Cinccino just drawing cards seems a lot better. You get a little bit of extra room for tech because you have a little bit more of a minimal line. So this might end up being a better way to play this deck because you can always use Make Do. You don't necessarily need to get out those Inteleons, but your damage output is quite often going to be a little bit lower. You don't have access to Path to the Peak. You do have access to Collapse Stadium, which means you can discard things like Lumineon. It's interesting. I mean, I think like just being able to use Starbirth, Trinity Nova, Trinity Charge, attack, have the space for Yveltal, use its attack, pitch away your opponent's special energies if necessary, and kind of roll through your deck is certainly appealing. I can see why players would play this. I just don't think that this deck is as advanced or as polished as the Arceus Inteleon build right now. And that might be something that changes. I think this is a deck that's probably going to end up breaking into the top 10. I know a lot of players have played it. Even Gustavo Watt has played this deck. And I believe they won a tournament as well. So I would keep an eye out for it. Top players typically play top decks. So if you're looking for a top deck, this probably is one. I do imagine it's going to shoot in the top 10. Again, very similar to the Arceus Inteleon builds. Dread ending all the way to number 11 and falling off from number 9 last week is Eternatus VMAX. Now, I think this deck has fallen off a little bit because there's quite a few dark decks in our top 10, and Etern just maybe is not the most appealing to every single person. The whole strategy of this deck is to build up a big bench with your Eternal Zone ability, and that's going to give you the opportunity to hit for a lot of damage with its Dread and attack 30 times each Pokemon. This deck has gained a little bit of cool things. You have access to Choice Belt, so that 270 base times the 9 Pokemon you have, 9 times 3, 270. You can now do Choice Belt to make it 300, and you could use Leon to get to 330. Maybe Zigzagoon to knock out a Mirror Eternatus VMAX. And of course, this deck is weak to Dark, or it is Dark, so you can beat decks that are weak to Dark, such as Mew VMAX, fairly easily, or at least that's the idea behind the deck. Leopard does give you an extra draw. I've taken this card in and out. I've been watching what's going on with Josh Frink and Alex Szymanski's deck. They've both been playing this deck a lot, so I think that adding Leopard in is really cool. I think having Moltres to accelerate energies back and energy switch them back is cool. I think Zigzagoon's great to get that extra 10 here or there. Leon's just an underrated card with Choice Belts, and I think looking at numbers a little bit differently can be absolutely huge. And that's the way that I look at the list. I think Etern is probably underrated in this format. It's probably too base compared to other dark decks. It's pretty easy to play, but if you do know someone who's like kind of new to the game, Etern would be a very strong, compelling strategy to give to them. And I do think Etern, again, it could break into the top 10, no problem. It was literally only 20 CP out from number 10 spot, making the top 10 list, and that's like really, really, really good. So we'll have to see how it continuously plays out, but I think that Etern's worth a try. We'll have to see exactly where it lands next week. Maybe it's going to shoot up a little bit. And that's what we got going on with this video today, peeps. Hopefully you enjoyed watching it with Etern in the top 11. So close to making top 10. I know a lot of Etern players are out there, and I know that a lot of people aren't giving this deck the credit it deserves. I mean, I think Etern's a pretty solid deck, so give it a try if you haven't already, but I think I mean, it's pretty close to where it's supposed to be at, but I do think it could be a top 10 deck. So I'll have to see how it plays out. Like I said, all of the available decks are going to be available in the pinned comment below, so check that out. We also have access to all the cool things in the description. Like I said, you can use code PTCGeoStore5, or sorry, Zealosage5 at PTCGeoStore.com. Thank you. I'm sure someone will catch that in the comments. And you can use code Zealosage8 at Atlas Collectibles to save 8% off your Pokemon TCG needs. You can also go to metafy.gg/@ZachLasage. We've got a lot of great things coming up this week, so stay tuned for a great week. I am excited to create a bunch of content, and we'll see exactly where we land. Salt Lake City's coming up this week, so what I recommend is just picking a deck that you really like, rolling with it. If you need any help, like I said, hit me up on Metafy. I'll catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.